Hey everyone. So when it comes to bot lane, support is actually the role that usually has way more impact than ADC, at least during the early game. We'll be covering some tips on how to dictate the pace of the lane, specifically for engaged supports in this video, since they need to get going early on. Let's jump into it. For this video, we'll be reviewing a game of an engaged champion versus a ranged support. Therefore, your first mission will be to trade HP to look for opportunities to make a play. All it takes is one good play to kill your opponents, whereas they need time to poke you down. You're going to likely need to tank damage from time to time to look for an opportunity to set up a kill. Mission 2 will be to use your flash aggressively as soon as you can. You want to be proactive against ranged supports. You don't want to wait until after they've poked you down. If you see an opportunity to flash in and land CC on either laner, if they're squishy, they will very likely die unless they flash. And your final mission will be to avoid heading into the bot lane immediately off of a recall. This is a mistake that we often see supports make. Unless your ADC and or tower are in immediate danger, you need to be pathing towards mid or river to establish vision control or look for a play with your jungler or mid laner. Heading to bot lane immediately doesn't make good use of the proactivity that your champion can bring to a team. Alright, enough with the missions, let's jump into it. For this replay, we'll be reviewing a Thresh game from G2's Mikyx. Immediately, we see Mickey and Kai'Sa head into the enemy red buff to get a ward down. This can be risky to do, especially if the enemy team comp were to just be stacked in this bush. But the enemy team was composed of a lot of weak level 1 champions, so they took the risk and it paid off to get the vision. They wait around for a bit to see if they can get a random pick, but end up just leaving. Getting early vision down on the enemy's buff can provide a lot of crucial information. For one, we now know that the enemy bot lane is leashing when we see them at the buff. Therefore, Mickey and Kai'Sa can establish early lane control. 2, we'll be able to see the enemy jungler's path after the buff. While we may not be able to see them clear their jungle the entire time, we can form an idea of where they will be based off of which way they pathed and play accordingly. Once they get to lane, Mickey immediately sets up in the bush. This way, when the enemy arrives in lane, they're forced to play very respectfully, and it does ultimately force Ezreal to miss a melee creep. Also, thanks to the ward that Mickey placed earlier on, we do see Zac move from red buff to Krugs. Mickey and Kai'Sa can continue to play aggressively though, even though that Zac is bot side. This is due to Thresh's Flay being able to cancel Zac's jump, along with the fact that Ezreal and Yuumi don't really have any follow up at level 1, meaning that they're not in any real danger. If they were against a more threatening gank combo, such as Xin Zhao jungle with an Ashe and Morgana bot lane though, they'd have to position much more carefully and use that vision that they got to back off. But that's not the case, so Mickey continues to aggressively hold the bush, while Yuumi is forced to waste a ward on it. Mickey then appropriately backs off, since he can be autoed and harassed for free. And now that he's ceded control over that bush, Mickey will play passively until level 2. We did say that you should look to trade your HP to look for opportunities, but only if those opportunities are worth it. Thresh's level 1 isn't strong enough to justify tanking Ezreal and Yuumi Qs. Thanks to Mickey's prior ward, we can also see Zac path from Krugs to his Raptors. This means that they can play aggressively for a long time, because Zac is likely pathing to his topside jungle now. Mickey begins walking up prior to hitting level 2, but as his wave is dying. Many players wait until they actually hit level 2 to begin moving forward, but you should be looking to do it as your minions are dying to try and surprise your opponent. But this is high challenger, so they don't fall for it. Mickey ends up tanking both of their Qs, unable to actually land his hook, but it's worth it, as they retain lane control anyways. After the enemy kills that melee creep, we can see that Thresh and Kai'Sa have retained 2 extra caster creeps from the previous wave. This gives them a minion advantage, which means that they have wave and lane control. This is a really important concept as a melee champion. Trading your health to look for a play is important, but sometimes doing so to acquire lane control can be just as important. If the enemy laners are hitting you while they run away from you, they're not hitting the wave, letting your ADC build a minion advantage. As a melee, you would rather be the one with minion advantage, since this naturally lets you look for more opportunities. If, for example, the enemy had more minions, it would make walking into them harder, and they'd have more minions to block your hook. Engaged supports need to all in, so having to fight your opponent while you're at a minion disadvantage can be very detrimental to your success. Back to the lane, Thresh once again walks up to them, tanking a Yuumi Q and forcing Ezreal to Q to last hit. Then, Mickey's hook pressures them far enough back that it forces Ezreal to miss another melee creep. Here we can see another advantage of having minion wave control. Usually, wasting your hook or a highly threatening ability like Leona E, Blitzcrank Q, or Gragas E will allow the enemy to walk past the defense of their minions and poke you out. However, having traded his HP for wave control, despite missing his hook, they have such a big wave advantage that Ezreal and Yuumi can't pressure, so Mikyx can just chill until his hook is off of cooldown. And despite knowing that this bush is warded, Mikyx walks up, baiting them to try and poke him, letting him look for a well-placed hook, which heavily chunks the Ezreal and forces him to use a potion. But now that his hook is down, Mikyx walks away, perhaps pretending that he's roaming, but the second his hook is back up, he immediately flashes in and reads the Ezreal E for an easy kill. Remember, you want to use your flash proactively in lane, just like he did here, and it's typically going to be easier to pull off than what we just saw here. Mikyx was against an Ezreal Yuumi lane, where its only option is going for an Ezreal who has a built-in blink. If you're against a less safe lane like Jinx Nami, then when you flash onto either of them, they have to flash or they die. And even if they flash, they could still potentially die. This is the heart of why you want to flash proactively as an engaged support. It's a 50-50 whether they die or not, but there's usually no risk to you, so it's always beneficial to try and do so. With Sejuani coming to help, they end up diving the defenseless Yuumi since she has no one she can take onto. Afterwards, they do make the mistake of tunneling really hard onto the Ezreal for a dive, but end up taking too much damage because their minions weren't at tower yet. Because of this, Sejuani has to die when they retry the dive, but that's very worth to put Ezreal even further behind. Then Kai'Sa and Thresh recall together and Mikyx picks up mobility boots. As an engaged support, you're almost always going to want to buy mobies first. The ability to move around the map and make picks will result in more gold generation than the slight increase in gold you get by buying the upgraded version of your support item. Now, as we said, you don't want to walk back to lane with your ADC immediately. Typically, you want to look for a potential play in mid lane or river with your jungler while your ADC is slowly walking back to lane. But in this case, Kai'Sa opted to teleport very far up in the lane and she has no flash. So Mikyx just gets minor vision control with the sight plant and goes to back up his ADC. As we talked about, the enemy is now the ones with the slow push, making it very difficult for Mikyx to walk towards them and look for a play. So he mind games them instead. Since he has mobility boots, he walks towards the river. This forces them to spam ping their teammates back in mid lane as the threat of him showing up is really high. Once the enemy team backs off due to the threat of his roam, he can double back bottom really fast with his mobies. And because he has a flank, he can bypass the minion rule we've discussed and set up a great chunk onto Ezreal. If you find yourself in a situation like this, do what Mikyx does here and help your ADC push so you can dive the low HP ADC. They can see Zac mid, so this dive is for sure a 2v2, which prompts Mikyx to look for the killer hook and sets up the kill. Don't be a KDA player when playing an engaged support. You should be trading your life for high value targets like this if you see the opportunity. Once Mikyx respawns, Kai'Sa is in the process of basing. This gives him an absurd amount of time to go and do something on the map, so he immediately paths toward mid. And sure enough, his pit stop mid forces Sylas to use his ultimate onto Ahri and use it as an escape tool just by being there. That's definitely frustrating for Sylas and will help out Ahri in lane. Then, because Kai'Sa's recall took a long time, he can hang around mid and even loop around for another attempt to kill Sylas. Unfortunately, they both missed their skill shots on an otherwise free kill, but at least mid lane is won for now, so this Ahri can maybe return the favor by roaming bot later on. After making sure that Ahri can push safely, Thresh returns to his Kai'Sa, and we can probably pause here. At this point, he's gotten Kai'Sa so far ahead that they can kind of do whatever they want, and there's no real point discussing that. By trading his health effectively and proactively using his flash, Mikyx set up a series of events that easily let him and Kai'Sa demolish this bot lane. So good luck engaging in your games, and thanks for watching.